What's up guys, my name's Brandon and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new iOS 26 features and changes. We're going to talk about Apple's secret camera project, the new colors that might be coming for the iPhone 17, a crazy AirTag story, and more. And as always, if you guys want to continue the conversation off YouTube, be sure to check out the Apple Den Discord server linked below. Okay, so this week was relatively quiet in the world of Apple, just as we anticipated. So we did see the release of iOS 18.6 Beta 1. I did make a community post here on my channel about that update. I did not make a video because there was literally nothing new in the update, and I did not want to make a video telling you guys about nothing new in the update. So that was released this week, but that was the only software update that we saw. We did not see anything new for iOS 26 as expected. That will be coming next week, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I want to start off this video by covering even more new iOS 26 features and changes. We've already covered like probably 160 changes at this point, maybe more than that, but there are even more that I have not covered yet. So let's get into those. So if we head into our settings and go into general and then into software updates, I just realized today that I have not shown you guys the new software update screen in iOS 26. So now at the bottom, it shows iOS is up to date. It shows the version. We have that check mark above and then more details down below. And when you tap on that, it takes you into the version number. So that little screen there is new. Now also, if you go to the settings general about page and then you scroll down to where you have your IMEI number right here, if you tap and hold on that, we now get a new option for barcode. So now you can display a barcode instead of typing in those IMEI numbers. Now there's also a nice change in the wallet application, and this is something that's been requested for quite some time now, for the past couple of years. So if you go into your wallet and go to one of your cards, so I have this American Express card right here, and we tap the options up in the top right where it says 1, 2, 3. When you tap on that, we now have a new section that says add physical card information. And when you tap on that, you can either scan it or you can enter card details manually. And this is where you can input your card number, expiration, security code, and description. So if you want to manage your full card number and all your full details instead of just relying on Apple Pay, you can add that in there now. Now here's a small change in the emoji picker with iOS 26. So now if you go to the emoji picker here and you tap on emoji, take a look at the search field right there. For a brief couple of seconds, it shows the description of that emoji. So if you're ever wondering what the emoji actually is, when you tap on it, it shows relieved face. If I tap on this one, smiling face with tear. Now this also works for memojis. So if I select this one right here, you can see it says laughing pointing. It's whatever I chose to make that Genmoji, or like this one right here, you know, that's a sticker, so it doesn't count. But this cat one right here, it will say cat with a beard. So just a small change, but that could help you if you're trying to make a Genmoji or a Mixmoji with words and you want to know what you should be typing in. Now heading over to the phone application, it's something that I did cover in my original What's New video, but I just wanted to mention it again, is that we now have haptic feedback anytime somebody not only hangs up the phone, but also when they answer the phone call. So now when they pick up or hang up, you know, it will give you that haptic feedback on your phone, which is really subtle, but it is a really nice touch. And also when you're on a phone call and you get another call at the same time that you're already on the phone, you know how before we had that really confusing screen? Now we don't have that anymore. It just pops up at the top just like it does when you're getting a phone call when you're not already on a call. So it's much easier to manage multiple calls at once. In the news application, if you tap on the little search over here and then you go into puzzles, there's a new puzzle with iOS 26, and that is the emoji puzzle. So if we wait for this to load right here, you can see we do get this new splash screen right here that says introducing leaderboards. That is new with iOS 26. And then right here, you can see under quartiles, we have emoji game, and that is the new one here with iOS 26 if you are an Apple News Plus subscriber. Now, one of the ugliest UI elements in iOS 18 has finally been fixed with iOS 26, and that is the back tap banner. So now if we invoke back tap by double tapping the back of our phone, you can see that the new banner up top has a much more modern look, a much better look than what we had with iOS 18, which we all complained about collectively. Now, speaking of accessibility, if we head into the motion section and then go into vehicle motion cues, we do have a customize appearance section now where we can change how the dots appear on the screen. So you can change the color of the dots. You could also make them larger. You could also add more dots as well. And you can also change the pattern from regular to dynamic. So that is all new here with with iOS 26. Before, you just had a simple on or off or automatic toggle there for vehicle motion cues. In the fitness application, if you go to the Apple Fitness Plus tab right here, and then you go to plans, you can now have a plan preview. So it'll show you a preview of your plan before you actually, sign up for it. In the Safari application, if you go to the share sheet right here, and then you go to add it to home screen, of course, that will create a web app for that website. Well, now with iOS 26, every website that gets added to the home screen opens as a web application, even if it's not configured to be one. This was found in the release notes for Safari 26, and you can see also Safari now supports HDR images and SVG icons. So you should see higher quality icons now on iOS 26 and across all new software updates that use Safari. And then also we do have HDR images finally on the iPhone. In the Notes application, you know how you have the undo and the redo buttons? Well, for some reason, redo almost never shows up for me, but undo does. But if you actually haptic press on that undo button, it opens up a menu where you do have the option to redo right there. Now, this week, we did also see some interesting news surrounding Spotify, because we saw in the code of Spotify's desktop application and the web player that there are new references to lossless audio. And earlier this year, Bloomberg did report that Spotify was planning to launch a Music Pro subscription that's going to have high quality audio and other additional perks, and that might be an additional $6 a month on top of your existing Spotify plan. So you might be able to get higher quality audio in the form of lossless, but it is going to cost you on Spotify. And then speaking of music applications, something else that I did not cover just yet is that Apple is now going to allow developers to show animated artwork on the iPhone's lock screen. It's not going to be just Apple Music. And that's because Apple just opened up a new API called MP Media Item Animated Artwork. We also saw some interesting news surrounding YouTube and ad blockers this week. So we just saw multiple people on Reddit and also on the Brave browser forums noticing that when they have ad block enabled, videos just don't show up for the first few seconds, and you get a pop-up that directs them to an ad blocking section of the technical support page on Google. So it seems like YouTube is continuing to crack down on those using ad blockers. So just beware of that if you are using one. Now, coming back to iOS 26 here, let's talk a little bit more about the performance, the battery life, and when to expect beta 2 of iOS 26. Now, as far as the performance goes, a lot of people have asked me, has the performance gotten better since it's been, almost 2 weeks now? And the answer to that is no. The performance is still terrible. It is a beta 1. That is expected. If you are on a beta and you are complaining about the performance, that's a you problem. That's what betas are for. You have to go in just expecting to have issues, and you should not be complaining about them. The best thing you could do is just go into the feedback application and report any type of issues or bugs that you are having so that they are fixed in a quicker manner. But for me on iOS 26 beta 1, I do have it on my main device. I've had it on there since day one. It is still very buggy. It is still very laggy, especially with the keyboard. I'm constantly having to retype things because it's just a really laggy keyboard experience across all of iOS. There are a ton of micro stutters. There's a lot of stuttering in general on the lock screen, on the home screen. Going from app to app, it does stutter quite a bit. The control center is quite laggy. And of course, it does still have, not as much, it's still a little bit too transparent in that background. So I am expecting an adjustment to that as well. So we're still having all the same bugs that we had last week. So don't expect anything to just magically change because we got that little hot fix on Friday that was just to fix a bricking issue. That didn't really change anything related to the performance. So I just wanted to keep that in mind for you guys. Now, I did run a fresh Geekbench test, and I actually scored worse this week than last week. So I scored a 3469 and an 8241 right here in Geekbench 6 on 26 beta 1. Now, I have to say I did only have one random respring this week as opposed to like 3 last week. So at least it is getting a little bit better in terms of random resprings, but it is still quite a buggy experience just as expected. I'm not mad because because I went in knowing to expect that. Now, as far as battery life goes, battery life is also abysmal still here almost 2 weeks later on beta 1. Again, just as expected. Battery life is quite bad. I'm using well over 100% battery every single day. I didn't do that very often on iOS 18, and I think a big, culprit for that is the heat that iOS 26 produces. So the new UI, the new redesign, is absolutely producing more heat from the device than usual. I've noticed that on every device I've used 26 on. And by the way, I have had the adaptive power mode turned on since day one, and I've not really noticed any type of change with having adaptive power enabled. So I'm not sure if that's a bug. Maybe it's just not, I'm not noticing it because there's no UI pop-up or anything like that, but I've noticed that there's really no change at all when I use adaptive power versus when I have it disabled. But if we go in and look at my battery usage on my main device here, you could see 181% on June 19th. That is insane. I think that's a record, actually. Yes, that is a record. So you could see that 150%, I use over 100% every single day of the week, only 99% right now for today, but it's about to cross that 100% mark. So insane battery usage on iOS 26 beta 1. I do hope to see that improved with beta 2. Probably not going to be a big change, but it might. Okay, so now let's talk about when to expect that second beta for iOS 26, because I do think that we are going to see that next week on the week of June 23rd. So I do think we're going to see iOS 26 developer beta 2 on either Monday the 23rd or Tuesday the 24th. One of those 2 days seems to be the most likely to expect that. Now, as far as the public beta, I have had quite a few people ask me because they're not waiting, or they are waiting at least, until the public beta to install iOS 26. I would not expect that until mid-July, maybe even late July. So we might see that alongside the release of beta 3 for developers, or it might come alongside developer beta 4. So we'll have to wait and see on that. It's still up in the air, but we are expecting that at some point in July. And then of course the final release will be down here in September at some point, most likely mid-September. And then for those of you on iOS 18 right now, so if you're on the developer beta program, of course we did have 18.6 beta 1 this week. I would expect to see beta 2 in July, or either July or June 30th. So right there on June 30th, which is a Monday, or possibly on Tuesday, July 1st. I would not expect any type of major changes with iOS 18.6 beta 2, just like we did not see with beta 1. I know one of the big features expected in iOS 18.6 was going to be AI for China, but that has been delayed. I did talk to some people in the Discord server who are from China, and they gave me some insights into that, and they don't see that happening anytime soon. So that's some good intel that you can really only get in the Apple Den Discord server from somebody who's actually there. But anyways, that's what to expect with iOS 26 and iOS 18. We're still not hearing anything about iOS 18.5.1, so that is still a possibility. We just don't really know when to expect that at this point. Okay, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with Apple's secret camera project that really blew me away, because we're now hearing that Apple developed a custom camera using iPhone components to capture high-speed footage for its upcoming F1 film. So Apple replaced the standard real F1 broadcast cameras with a bespoke camera module that was engineered around an iPhone camera sensor. And the reason for it is because they wanted to have cinematic quality from behind, the cockpit of an F1 car. So these custom modules included a 48 megapixel sensor, which was probably from the iPhone 15 Pro, along with an A series chip, which was likely the A17 Pro, an iPhone battery, and a built-in ND filter. And this camera module ran a custom iOS firmware that would capture this footage in ProRes log, and that was actually viewed and controlled from a custom iPad app. And basically the iPhone was plugged into the iPad, and that was what gave it the control to adjust the frame rate, the exposure, the white balance, everything. And since Apple was following the F1 rules, and this was actually on real F1 cars during real races, there were no wireless radios per the F1 rules. And yes, I said real F1 races because Apple actually has POV footage from real races from the 2023 and 2024 seasons, and that's going to appear throughout the upcoming F1 the movie film, and it's going to blend seamlessly with the traditional shots from the movie set. And fun fact, since Apple Apple was working on this back in 2023. This, project they had, this secret project they were doing that nobody knew about back then, with F1 or anything, nobody knew that this is actually what led to ProRes log video on the iPhone. So this is actually what helped introduce that feature to us consumers. So it's really a big win when Apple does something so incredible like this engineering feat that they're doing here just to film scenes for their upcoming movie, that F1 the movie film. We benefit as well as consumers because we get these more professional cinematic features on our iPhone. And just to think that the same camera module that we have in our phone was on these F1 cars recording footage for what we're going to see on the big screen and in IMAX. That is so impressive. Now, also this week, we saw leaker Majin Buu mention that we have 2 potential new colors for the iPhone 17 coming later this year, the base model, not the Pro model. So he's saying that Apple is testing purple and green for the iPhone 17 base models, but there's a chance that only one will be selected for launch, with purple expected to be the front runner. And I believe that the iPhone 14 was the last time we had a purple iPhone for the base model. So I'm a big fan of purple personally, so I would love to see that happen. But what do you guys think? Would you rather have purple? Would you rather have green? Or would you rather have another color that we've not heard about just yet for the upcoming iPhone 17? I'm also really interested to see if we're actually going to get a 120 hertz refresh rate for the upcoming iPhone 17 and 17 Air, because we are hearing from Majin Buu that he is also expecting to see 120 hertz on the base model. So that would be pretty amazing if we do actually see that. And I'm also curious to see if the 17 and 17 Air are going to have the same color selections. And speaking of products coming later this year, we're also hearing that the Apple Watch Ultra 3 is finally coming this year after a 2-year hiatus. Because if you remember, last year we saw the Apple Watch Ultra 2 kind of get re-released, but in a black version. So it's the same Apple Watch Ultra 2, just in a new black titanium instead of the original, which was the silver. So we were waiting for a couple of years for an Ultra 3, and now it seems like we are finally going to get that later on this year in September. And we're hearing that the Apple Watch Ultra 3 might have satellite connectivity and also 5G connectivity, along with, of course, a better chipset and probably better battery life as well. Maybe even a slight change to the design. I'm not expecting a major redesign though. But one product that will be getting redesigned, not this year, but next year, is the MacBook Pro. And I've been hearing a lot of questions about that. I've been seeing a lot of people ask me about the next MacBook Pro. When are we going to see the OLED MacBook Pro? When are we going to see the redesigned MacBook Pro? Well, let's talk about that, because we're now hearing that the MacBook Pro redesign is coming in 2026, 5 years since its last major revamp in 2021. So the biggest change, of course, is going to be the move from mini LED to OLED, but it's not just going to be any OLED, because we're hearing that this MacBook Pro is going to have what the iPad Pro had, which is the tandem OLED display. And that's going to be where, 2 RGB layers are stacked on top of each other for more brightness and improved display longevity. Also, the notch is most likely going to be going away, and we're going to have more of like a dynamic island look on the Mac like we have on the iPhone. And also, just like the iPad Pro, Apple is going to try to make this MacBook Pro as thin and light as possible. So we are going to see a pretty big reduction in the weight and the, overall thickness of the device. Because if you remember, for the last redesign, the MacBook Pro actually got thicker and heavier. So I'm sure Apple's going to make a pretty big, statement with that, especially now that we have the 17 Air coming out soon. And this redesigned MacBook Pro is expected to be powered by the M6 family of chips. So the M6, M6 Pro, M6 Max, maybe even something more than that, but it will be the M6 family. And we are also hearing that cellular connectivity is a possibility with this MacBook Pro redesign, which would be a game changer for me. That's going to make working so much better and easier when you're on the go. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this time in London, a couple woke up to a frustrating surprise. Their Jaguar was missing from their driveway. The car, that is, not the animal. So the wife, Mia, walked up and down the street confused, thinking that maybe her husband had moved it, but the husband, Mark, had not touched it. And that's when it hit them, it had been stolen. Still, it didn't make any sense. The car had 2 immobilizers, one from the manufacturer and another one that they installed themselves. It shouldn't have been possible to steal without entering the correct PIN number. So they immediately called the police to report the theft, and they also told police that thankfully there was an AirTag hidden inside the car as well. But police didn't seem all too concerned about this call because they gave what Mia called a vague response, saying that maybe a patrol car would be sent and that they would keep them updated. So of course, the couple decided to take matters into their own hands. So they fired up the Find My application on their iPhones. They saw that the AirTag was pinging a location just 9 minutes away from their home. So they quickly drove in their other car to that location before the thief might realize that there's an AirTag inside. So once they arrived to the spot where their stolen Jaguar was, they see it just parked on a quiet street, empty. So they jumped into the Jaguar to try to steal it back, but there was a big problem. The immobilizer that they had installed themselves was doing its job a little too well because they couldn't start the car and they had to contact the software company for that immobilizer. So after, talking to them and showing them proof that they were the actual owners, the company sent someone out to unlock it, and it was eventually towed back to their home. And turns out the thieves had managed to bypass the built-in immobilizer. That's how they were able to steal it, but they were not able to bypass the second one that they had installed themselves. So that's when I guess the thieves broke down 9 minutes away from the house. And police said that car thefts are on the rise in London and almost none of them are leading to charges. So thankfully, this one had a happy ending, all because of an AirTag. If it was not for that AirTag, they may have never seen this Jaguar again. And even if they did, they may not have caught the person who was doing it. I guess they didn't actually catch the person because we didn't hear any news about anybody getting charged, but at least they got it back and it seems to be in okay shape. Anyways, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week should be a lot more exciting with iOS 26 Beta 2 and hopefully some more Apple news as well. Again, if you are not subscribed to the Apple Den newsletter, that's linked down below along with the Apple Den Discord server. And of course, if you're not subscribed here on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.